I want to talk about economics as a field and whether it is a tool set, like a set of instruments for looking at the world, or whether it is an object of study, like the economy. And in a lot of ways, I think it's actually both, but people may get confused when they look at the literature in economics, because we have things like the economics of crime, the economics of marriage, the economics of language, the economics of privacy, the economics of domestic violence. Like if you just go to Google and look up the economics of and then start one letter, you're going to get a whole list of things that economists can study. And some of those are going to seem really far off from the economy. So I want to explain that in this video. And of course, I'm using the microscope analogy where the microscope itself is the instrument. It's the tool set with which you look at the world. And then the object of study is the petri dish. It's whatever you're actually looking at. And I think a lot of people will think, okay, economists study the economy. Like that is the thing that is in our petri dish if we have something in there. And that's not exactly right. Like it's partially right. But when economists started looking at what is the economy, what you find actually is the economy is a set of scarce resources, and it's really about how those resources flow. So obviously those resources can be like natural resources like water and minerals from the earth and oil. They can be human resources like labor. They can be attention resources like more theoretical things like people's attention is a scarce resource. People's energy to do good work and solve problems, that's a scarce resource. Time is certainly a scarce resource. So there's lots of different elements of scarce resources that are going to make up what people think of when they think of the economy. And so what's really in our petri dishes is not the economy, which is a construct of some sort. It's scarce resources itself. Like economists study scarce resources. Now, to study scarce resources, we have developed this tool set over time. And the tool set includes things like marginal thinking, trade-offs and how to weigh trade-offs, opportunity costs. Like we have this big long list of tools we use that help us to think about scarce resources. And those are what I'm going to call the instruments. So if we're asking the question, has the field of economics gone off course by studying all of these weird things that don't seem like they have anything to do with the economy? There's going to be two answers to that. Have we gone off course? And there are some ways where I think we have gone a little bit off course, or at least gotten a little bit sloppy. And then there's other ways where these things that might not at first seem like they relate to scarce resources actually very much do. So let me start with where economists might have gone a little bit off course potentially. And that is the tool set that economists use for looking at scarce resources. That's definitely expanded over time. And as econometrics and statistical techniques have come on the scene, a lot of economists have started to focus our instruments on how do you actually tease out causality, given that many things in the economy, like jobs and public policy and whatnot, are things that we cannot do experiments on. So we've developed a set of statistical tools that help us to tease out causality when we can't do experiments. Like that's one piece of our tool set. And the one place where I think maybe economists have gone a little bit off course in terms of the definition of our field is where we're using these statistical techniques, but we're not grounding those statistical techniques in theory. Like ideally, you start out with a theory, and the theory uses the tool set that really thinks about scarce resources. Like the theory is the hypothesis, and then the statistical techniques are the tools for testing the hypothesis. When economists skip the hypothesis phase and just like start looking into the data, looking for patterns, using our instruments of teasing out causality, that's where I think we can go a little bit off course. However, I also want to make the case that most of these things that we look at and say that has nothing to do with economics, most of them actually very much do involve scarce resources. So like crime, the economics of crime. If somebody's committing a crime, they're investing their own time, their own energy. Those are both scarce resources, and they have an opportunity cost to doing that crime. They might weigh trade-offs. So that one is definitely squarely in the realm of scarce resources. The economics of marriage also involves time and emotional energy. And one scarce resource you could imagine is you only get to marry one person. Like that slot that you have for marriage is a scarce resource. And even if you say, okay, you can get divorced, maybe you could marry 5 people or 10 people, it's still bound by the scarce resource of your lifetime, like a time scarce resource. What about things like the economics of privacy? And this is one that has to be enforced at a higher level in the system. Like enforcing human rights is something that societies have to prioritize. Which rights do we put a lot of energy into enforcing? Which rights do we say we have, but we're not going to invest a lot in making sure people actually get those rights? And so from the system perspective, the government perspective, you have the scarce resource of energy that the government has to actually do enforcement. Because you're not going to have an unlimited amount of energy to enforce things, given that it requires people's time, a scarce resource. So if you find yourself wondering, is this really economics when you're reading an economics paper? Probably it is, and you want to relate it back to the scarce resources. But in some rare cases, economists may just be using the tool set, say the statistical and econometric tool set, without actually grounding their work in theory, which is part of the scientific process.